Well, welcome everybody and good afternoon. Hopefully everybody had a pretty good lunch. Today, or this afternoon's presentation, Kyle and I are both going to talk about the development of prescribed burn associations. We're going to put a bit of an emphasis on the state of Nebraska, but it's kind of consistent throughout the rest of the Midwest. But real quick introductions. I'm Rob van Lieshout. I'm a Farm Bill wildlife biologist up in the Northeast. I'm stationed out of Hardington and cover Knox, Cedar, and Dixon County. What's that?
Oh, when you're done, I'll introduce myself.
Oh, I was going to still talk a little bit. Most of my workload as a Farm Bill biologist is to work on CRP and EQIP properties, but I do have a fair amount of time and experience in working with PBAs, especially up in my region, and then writing burn plans and being actively involved in prescribed fire.
And I'm Kyle Shoemaker with Northern Prairies Land Trust, based out of the Verdigris Brazil biologically unique landscape, mostly Knox County. So really, Rob and our work area overlaps quite a bit. Let's see. A lot of my responsibilities are working with private lands and helping to implement our Natural Legacy Project. For those of you that aren't from Nebraska or aren't familiar with the Legacy Project, that's our Game and Parks' State Wildlife Action Plan. And so, private lands conservation. That's what most of our workload is. Before we get started, just so we can kind of make sure that our message, or that kind of this conversation that we kind of hope to have with you guys is productive, or the most productive that we can make it. Maybe a quick show of hands of different types of demographics we have in here. How many people in here are just landowners today? Show of hands. Okay, agency folks. Yep. University researchers, couple. Okay. Any major ones I'm missing? Fire departments. Great. Good point. So I guess today we just what we're doing in Knox County, Western Knox County, is starting a new burn association or expanding on an existing burn association. And so we thought today we just maybe talk about kind of the background of that process, what that's looked like for us, how I think our approach is unique, and then some things that are working really well, and some things that maybe we'd like to see a little different, or that we need to be emphasizing more on, or things that maybe just have flat out not worked so far. So with that, yeah.
So we've had quite a few really good talks here at this conference so far about kind of the importance of using prescribed fire and a lot of the ecological needs of using fire either on its own or paired with tree cutting and then fire. And myself, and I see quite a few Farm Bill biologists in this room, I know a lot of us have the same shared experience where we have that one-on-one with the landowner, and once we mention, you got to burn, they go, well, how do I do it? And John Weir brought up in his talk yesterday, the 4 main points was, is there burn insurance, equipment, skills, and manpower. And we're not going to talk about insurance right now. There's another talk that's kind of going on about that. But PBAs kind of help it all by utilizing the concept of neighbors helping neighbors to share equipment, skills, and manpower to accomplish safe and effective prescribed burning. There's many different structures to this. In Nebraska, we've got quite a few of the formal structures where, you've got elected officials that kind of run the show, but we're seeing quite a few informal kind of structures where, you want to touch on this a little bit?
Yeah, yep. So is there any current PBA members in the room today? Yeah. So maybe how your organizations are set up is you have, whether they're elected or self-appointed, a president, a secretary treasurer, maybe you have an equipment manager, a number of these different positions. And what we've kind of seen in the northeast part of the state with our active burn associations is the people that volunteer to accept those workloads magically get tenured into it, and they can't find their way out of it. they know how to do it. They know how to do it right. And so part of that is, number one, we can't get younger generations involved, and number two, quite a few of our older delegations in the PBAs don't trust anybody else to do the job that they're doing, even though there's plenty of great candidates out there. And so that president and that kind of format, works well for a lot of people. I also know that depending on the different groups, we have like boards of directors that kind of have a similar type of thing, like the Niobrara Valley Prescribed Fire Association. That they kind of operate as a board of directors and then split up into two groups. And so one thing that we were wanting to make sure with this new burn association is that we have ways for guys to get involved, but then ways for new guys to get involved and old guys or guys that have done their time in these different positions to be able to pass the torch on easily. Trying to think more long term, have a more than just a 5 or a 10-year plan, but have an ongoing leadership structure for this burn association. So touch base, as we continue. And if there's any questions or comments, so we want to kind of keep this to be informal and conversational. So don't hesitate to speak up.
Yeah, and kind of to lead off on people utilizing a PBA consistently for a need or a want. We kind of see that there's two different objectives or needs that PBAs kind of bring to the table, and that's there's some landowners that burn as a choice. It's just another tool in the toolbox. If you've got a CRP that needs your management done, or you don't want to utilize chemical to spray weeds twice in a year, fire is a viable option to do that with. But then as, early this morning we heard Jim Jenkins talk, and he's like, fire is needed. If we don't burn, it's going to happen and we can't control it. So a lot of groups kind of going through that right now. Here's just kind of a breakdown of the PBAs that we do have in the state of Nebraska right now. This actually isn't a super updated picture. There's a couple more that have been established. But currently right now, everything that's kind of highlighted, those areas do have the resources. They've got the memberships, the manpower, they've got equipment, and then they do routine trainings and workshops for people that are interested. You want to talk about?
Yeah. Yep. So, I'm sure this is just going to sound like a jumbled mess with us grabbing this microphone. But one thing that John talked about yesterday when he was talking about PBAs was a lot of times those are set up, very similar to this, where they have a county boundary, or that's kind of their hard lines. One of the associations that isn't listed up here is the Niobrara Valley Prescribed Fire Association, and they're kind of split up into a west group and then an east group. And that east group does kind of cover Knox County, kind of covers the Verdigris-Brazil biologically unique landscape, or kind of my home territory. But so does kind of this Northeast Nebraska PBA that covers these counties here. And so one thing that we kind of identified was that the Verdigris-Brazil BUL, probably the area that needs fire the most in this whole landscape in the Northeast Nebraska, was no man's land for two different burn associations. And Beck has spent time in my position, Jen's been in my position. We've all spent collectively a tremendous amount of time investing in getting projects done, getting cedar work done, trying to get fire done, trying to upscale, and trying to recommend guys go through either of those two PBAs, and a few of them have, but the guys that are kind of right on the fringes on this side, and then maybe just a couple on the fringes up here. And we have almost a 500,000 acre really great rangeland complex that both PBAs ended up being too busy to work in, and the PBA to the east, they're very good at burning CRP. Rangeland burns are different than CRP burns, though, as most of us know that have by experience. And then our west group, they're saturated with their workload. They very much fit that mold of we have April to burn. If we get a couple burns done in March, great. And then because of how they burn, they don't use a lot of cost share. So a lot of their guys have opportunities to burn into May until the brome green's up too much. But the big thing is we've been working with landowners for over 15 years in the verdigris Brazil BUL without being able to upscale because of this, almost an absence or this no man's land between these two PBAs. And so I think the biggest thing with this is what makes this area unique is we have the cultural will to light and to upscale our prescribed burning efforts. But we just didn't have the organization to do it. We've got landowners all throughout this that are burning their own pasture, but staying out within their fence lines. We're a pretty modest group up in this neck of the woods to where I don't need to bother them. I'll just try and keep my ground good, and I don't need to pester them. Well, the guy on this side of the fence is saying the same thing. Well, I'll try to do my best on my side of the fence, but I don't need to be a bother to my neighbors, type of a thing. And so there's almost within that opportunity there's some limitations as well. So, do you have something? Yeah.
Are you guys still trying to enforce the burn moratorium up there?
No, not.
I thought you alluded to that, people burning into May because of the...
That's historically what was restricted, like our game and parks and NRCS programs. But now that that's gone away with, so those guys not using our cost share in the Boyd County area or any federal cost share, then they were able to get around that because we aren't helping them on their burns in that month, and they're a pretty self-sufficient group up in that area. So yeah, thanks. Yep. All right. Yeah.
No, you keep going.
So we recognize this need, and that's when we just between our local conservation partners group, we started getting meetings organized and set up. And so here in this last January, we just had an informal meeting, bought everybody supper, and had a cooler of refreshments, and got everybody around the same table just to number one, have everybody in the room. That just about everybody in this room burns already, and so for them to recognize, oh hey, wait a second, these guys burn and they're short on help and they're short on equipment and they're short on finding expertise the same as I am. And that was kind of our big goal, was just to get everybody in the same room together to recognize, hey, we all have this mutual challenge of we're losing our pasture still. We are having troubles with upscaling fire, and these are my neighbors that I didn't want to pester, type of a thing. It's basically bringing all of our neighbors together, kind of for the first time in this formal way. So, anything else, Rob? So some of the tactics we used at that meeting was to really give the landowners a microphone and have each of them express why they want to burn. We hope to be was and had it laminated and gave everybody dry erase markers, and they just went around and marked down, well, here's my property, I'd like to burn this pasture this year and this pasture in 3 years, and start putting dates on a calendar and lines on a map, so that as each person came up to sign in with registration and put their polygon on the map too, then they could start recognizing, oh man, my neighbor's here, and start seeing the collective effort. I mean, the whole map was covered in squares at the end of it, which is, that was kind of our hope. So we called it our our war map, basically. And so one thing that Doug Wisenhunt was helpful with us has been helpful with us this whole way. And one of his take-home messages was a successful burn association lights fires. That's what our goal is, right? That is to put fire on the ground. And so even with this challenging of a spring, that's what we really set out to accomplish. I guess to date, we still haven't quite identified our leaders. Our equipment is kind of a shuffle in the area of resources that our landowners already have versus what's available through Pheasants Forever and whatnot. But our main goal this spring was to get at least some fire on the ground, which was very challenging across our whole state this year. And that's what we were able to accomplish at the end of March. Everybody else wasn't issuing burn permits. The landowner, who we hopefully is one of our leaders with this PBA, they have a pretty tight-knit relationship with the fire department, really well apparently, because I think that was probably the only burn permit issued for the whole month of March or April across Knox County, and the fire chief gave the landowner the burn permit, and we were able to accomplish fire. So, I mean, mission accomplished. It wasn't, 210 acres. That's not quite at the scale that we need to be at in any given year, but it was fire on the ground, and that's successful to a PBA that's just in the starting type of a thing. So, want to talk this one?
Kyle kind of mentioned how the drought really played an impact on getting out. And so far this PBA, we've only had 2 burns done. But, I mean, kind of one of the successes was really people management, because it's really tough to get people to go out and help you on a burn, especially for like CRP, where you do it once every 5 years and people come out of the woodwork then. But with these rangeland burns, everybody pretty much showed up at both burns. And they're just waiting for they're biting at the bit when they got to go for their burn, and they know that those people will show up on theirs. I guess, how much time we got? Cut it? All right. Well, I guess that's pretty good then.
Yeah, we're happy to talk with people more afterwards. It's a lot to cover here in 20 minutes, or a short 20 minutes, but here's the contact information. Yeah. Thank you.
We do have a 10-minute break in between sessions, so if you guys want to ask some questions, you can, but we'll be setting up another.
Okay.
You guys plan to have regular meetings then?
Yeah, so we're hosting a habitat tour here on the 1st of September, and as part of that, our target audience is these new PBA members. And after that habitat tour, we'll have a PBA meeting following that lunch to go over and now we're going to try and identify some leadership, see if anybody wants to step up. But one thing we're going to try with our leadership structure is this covers 5 or 6 different fire districts, and so we're hoping to have a board of directors of sorts, where each director has their own responsibilities, but not everything is dumped onto one person. But each director represents one of those fire districts. So it spatially distributes our leadership. It provides a direct liaison to our fire departments. And so and our fire departments, some of them are really good with us, and some of them, look the other way, kind of as we're trying to get fire on the ground. So that's been what we've been working on, is to make sure that our fire departments, and then our local tribal agency is also involved with that. Making sure that all of our partners are in the room. It's landowner-led, landowner-oriented. I mean, that's the goal of these. And so I guess the biggest thing we've been trying to do is make sure that the landowners have the floor, and we give them any resources that they need to step up as leaders and take ownership and take pride in what they're able to accomplish. So
Trying to give everybody a seat at the table, pretty much. So.
yeah.
Hey, of your 18 crew members that you have, are all of them landowners, like on the landowners, or absentee landowners?
For that burn, the 18 crew members, I think we had 6 agency folks,
Yeah.
and then the rest of them were
Locals.
for the local landowners, not absentee landowners. Yep. We've got plenty of issues with absentee landowners up. I mean,
I didn't know if any absentee landowners were ever involved in the.
We do have a couple in some other PBAs, and
Yeah.
you know, it's hit or miss, but they tend to try to come up in the summer and kind of pay their dues by putting in the hours then. So
And our target, so our first reach out for that initial meeting, we just focused on our resident landowners. They're the ones that we've identified as needing the resource the most, and so we want to make sure that they're the ones that are forming the group and setting the foundation for that group. So one thing is we don't have a name for this group yet. So that's one thing if we could, that we're trying to do here this next week at our meeting is to settle on a name. That way the group has identity. That's one of the biggest things I think that we can do is, or that these groups can do to be successful is to give themselves an identity. And so that's one thing that we didn't get accomplished right away, but that
Takes
we're gonna,
time.
yeah, it's a process. So
Have either of you in the process of getting this association put together come across any resources like a guide, how to get started? Or who's been your go-to?
Yeah,
Brian Teeter's been a really good resource.
Brian Teeter, Cassidy Wessel, because
Yep.
Cassidy started or was a big push in the Hartington, or the Northeast Nebraska PBA.
But I'd say Doug Wisenhunt, who's actually giving a talk right now, we had him come out for our first meeting, and he actually gave a presentation on just burning together. And that really kind of solidified why we're doing what we're doing.
And then at that formation meeting, we had our two neighboring PBAs, or the two existing PBAs there with us. They've offered 100% support the whole way. Number one, it gets these people from contacting them and wanting to, it keeps their workload light, or lightens the one's workload hopefully tremendously. And so using our neighboring PBAs or existing PBAs for their resources, how are they doing things, what's working, what's not working for them. So I'm trying to circumvent some of those issues that they've brought up. So some of them we've done really good on, and we've come up with our own issues in the meantime. So, but good question. Thanks.
All right, we're gonna switch topic.
All right, that's good.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.